President of the Fairfield League of Women Voters, and I will be serving as your moderator this evening. The debate is between Craig Minor and Bill Zappone, candidates for the 66th Assembly District.
His name is Zappone.
I think the candidate can tell me that. Thank you so much.
You've been learning.
Craig Minor is a Republican incumbent, and Bill Zappone is a Democrat. Format will be traditional, with 2 minutes for each candidate for each question. I would also like to remind you that we would appreciate there being no applause during the event. It is distracting to the candidates and takes away from the time they have to respond to questions concerning issues we all care about. In other words, we would appreciate it if you would make your feelings known about the candidates in the voting booth on November 2nd rather than by applause this evening. Your cooperation will be sincerely appreciated, and at the conclusion of the debate, I encourage you to applaud as loudly as you wish. Also, please turn off your cell phones. The position of the candidates on the stage, the order of responding to the questions, and the order of their 2-minute closing statements will be decided earlier. It's now my pleasure to introduce the candidates. Immediately to my left is Bill Zappone, and next to him is Craig Minor. The first question will start with Mr. Zappone. What are your interests and what legislative committees do you want to serve on?
Thank you. By the way, it's Zappone, but please feel free to call me.
Thank you.
My interests are primarily why I got into this race, which is we need a better Connecticut. Obviously, we've got structural problems that have led to the state and poor financial health.
Can't hear you.
Not either.
What happened to the mic?
To that extent,
There you go.
to that extent, I certainly want to be on the Appropriations Committee, and I want to work with other legislators to make sure that we have a sound fiscal policy, that our budget is balanced, that we're no longer borrowing money, that we can to pay for current expenses, that we can generate a dynamic economy in the state to set us up for the future. I am eager at this point to get elected, to serve the people of this community at a time when that might be our most important in Connecticut's 375-year history. In times like this, when things are difficult, when money is tight, people are forced to make decisions and focus on what the state is really supposed to be. What is a community we really want to have? And that's why I'm eager to be involved with the legislature at this time. I feel like this is a time when we can actually make changes, and we can actually set goals and move forward as a community, as a larger community. And that is why I would love to work on the Appropriations Committee and really work with anyone I could on a bipartisan fashion to push this state forward and propel us, for the generation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Currently, I serve on the Appropriations Committee as the ranking member, and if re-elected, I would hope that I retain that position, assuming we don't end up in the majority, and then the chairman would be nice. I got traded when we ran out of money, so I'd like to try it once going into a good year. On the Appropriations Committee, as my opponent said, you do get an opportunity to really look at some level into the state's budget. I've had a little bit of difficulty getting the majority party to share information, and one of the focuses that I would have in the next year would be to try and develop a way for us to look equally at information, have an internal dialogue, so we could talk about our ideas in more depth. I've also enjoyed serving on the Environment Committee, and I would like to stay on that committee again. I think it's integral to the development of business here in the state of Connecticut. One of the bills that I supported last year would have required DEP to form a more streamlined permitting and licensing process. I think most people in business know that if you try to develop a business here, try to build a building, put on an addition, quite often some of the permits and licenses are quite a hurdle. And the last would be the Labor Committee. I've never served on labor, but I've had an opportunity to try and fend off some of the legislation that's come out of the Labor Committee. Mandatory requirements for employers such as paid sick leave, which I think most employers and employees have been able to work out so far, would be a challenge that I would look forward to And as I said, I've never served on the Labor Committee, so I think it would permit me an opportunity to have that debate within the committee setting, rather than try and catch that issue as it comes to the House floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Minor, having said what committees you'd like to serve on, what is the top priority on your agenda if elected?
Well, the top priority, I think, is getting our spending under control. The state faces about a $3 billion deficit. I think there are some revenues that are showing signs of stabilizing. I think if people looked at some of the information from the Office of Fiscal Analysis and Policy and Management, they would recognize that sales tax and income tax are up slightly, but ever so slightly. And at the same time, we still face some very significant problems in the state of Connecticut. Unemployment is one. The bill that we owe the federal government for the unemployment compensation that ran out in the state's coffers is the other. We're into the federal government for almost $1 billion at the end of December. And so I think that's another issue that we need to deal with. Unfunded liability, pensions and health care for folks that are currently employed by the state or are retired from state employment. So what I would hope to do in the upcoming session, if elected, would be to begin right after the election, looking more in depth at some of the expenses the state has, to try and make a determination on which targets I would shoot for in terms of reducing the state's costs. We spend about $100 million on health care for corrections people, not employees, but those that are incarcerated. And they pay back about 1% when they leave jail. And I think if most of you ended up at Charlotte for Hungerford Hospital, you'd know that you owe the whole bill. They owe about 3% of the bill. And we can only collect the money if they win the lottery or get an inheritance. So I think most of the issues that I want to focus on deal around the fiscal constraints of the state and also on where we go in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, for anybody running, the biggest issue that we face right now is the budget deficit. We have a $3 billion structural deficit, as Craig laid out. We also have a $3 billion liability that we have to pay to amortize our pensions as well as our health care requirements for state employees. That's a $6 billion hole, which basically turns out to be 32% of expected revenue. And this is an important reason why I'm running. I'm running because I feel that I can make more responsible decisions in trimming our budget than 32% than Craig can. Like you just heard him say, he's in favor of limiting health care for our inmates. Now, while I'll agree that that's a hefty bill to pay, $100 million, it's unconscionable to say that people who are in the state's care, that we're going to limit or take away their health care. That would constitute cruel and unusual punishment to the people in our corrections system. Other ideas Craig has had to reduce our budget are on. He recently was one of only 3 legislators to vote against supplying heating aid to almost 19,000 families in this winter. He's also, last week at the Home Builders and Realtors Association, he advocated the elimination of emergency services to people who can't prove that they're residents of the state. I, for one, think that that's not a place to come. That if somebody's up here visiting, if somebody comes to our state and they need help, that we should be able to provide it to them. There are many other places in our budget that we can trim things and cut things, and I'll go through them as the night goes on as my time's running out. But Craig is not responsible enough to make the cuts that we need, and he just proved it right there.